we are witnessing, industries across various sectors of the economy are getting completely disrupted. They are now leveraging new kinds of technologies like analytics, mobility, IoT, cloud services to deliver significant improvements in customer experience, or they're trying to improve their internal processes, or they're developing brand new value propositions. And so we are probably living in very exciting times when, the rate of change is so rapid that it's hard for, people to keep up. And, as people in this room are here, are probably count themselves as victims of this problem more rather than, the beneficiaries in some ways. Of course, Mackay did mention that, we all use Uber and we are using Amazon and we are using all these services. So as a consumer, we are happy. I don't know as technologists how happy we are about this. And in some industries, of course, the changes have been very momentous. Long-standing business leaders, as Martin mentioned, have been completely dislodged. Some of them are no longer there. Some of them are struggling to just keep up, particularly in industries like travel, hospitality, retail. I think these are the industries we can most closely identify as being disrupted. I mean, it's very, very visible. In some other industries, of course, the change is still underway, and you're seeing incumbents still have the opportunity to change and to become successful. Industries like manufacturing, financial services, even though Martin mentioned the fintech, but I think banks still have a great opportunity to, be a part of, be the disruptors rather than being disrupted. Media industry, we've seen disruption, but there are still media companies which have managed to adopt. Telecom, again another industry ripe for, disruption by a whole host of competitors. But we are also seeing the incumbents making changes very rapidly. So to join me on this discussion, I'd like to invite on stage the following people. Mr. Keyur Desai, CIO, Essar Ports and Shipping and Head Network, Telecom and Security at Essar Group. Many of you know Keyur, so please welcome him on stage. Mr. Tejveer Bhogal, AVP IT and Head Governance and Alliances, the Times Group. It's part of Bennett Coleman. Many of you know Bennett Coleman, so thank you Tejveer for being here. Mr. Navin Agarwal, Director, KPMG. Please welcome on stage, Navin. Mr. Rajendra Mhalsekar, Head Corporate Business and Digital Technology Solutions, Yes Bank. So please welcome on stage, Rajendra. And Mr. Martin Mackay, President and General Manager, APJ, CA Technologies. So thank you everyone for joining this discussion. And I think we have seen from Martin's presentation that successful digital transformation comes not only from just having new technologies at your disposal, but you also need to transform the entire organization to take benefit from it. And it's also apparent that this has to be driven by good leadership. I think that was one of the things that you put up on your slide, saying that you need good leadership, you need good vision to be able to actually do it. So I think the issue which we are discussing is, what do leaders, CXOs and leaders here need to do to lead a digital transformation and to get the benefits which are in line with the vision of the business. I think that's the challenge. So we see a lot of exciting things. Not all of those exciting things are probably applicable to all of our businesses. So my first question to the panelists is, how do you envisage a digital transformation generating or giving you new services or revenues for your line of business or your industry? What do you see? What kind of new roles can technology play in your industry? So Rajendra, you would ought to start, you're leading some of these.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks 9.9 and CA to invite us over here to express ourselves. And we are in really amazing times, it's very exciting times. And Martin, the way you presented it was really, very enlightening. So thanks for that. Yeah. So I come from the banking industry. So I come from S Bank, and we have just embarked on the digital transformation journey. But let me tell you one thing. I mean, just putting a couple of apps here and there and just having a omni-channel strategy doesn't make your digital transformation. That's why I'm saying we have just begun the journey. And as rightly Martin has pointed out, and he's saying it's a cultural change actually, and it's a cultural change over a period of time. So that is why it becomes a journey, and the journey could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The better you start earlier, the chances that you sustain in the longer run becomes more probable. Otherwise, there are many examples in the last 10 years, and the growth and going away is becoming shorter and shorter. Earlier 5 years, today maybe 2 years you could be just off. People may not even realize that last year you were there. This year
But
balance
the
sheet.
question for you, Rajendra, then is, we also hear of early adopters and then, early adopters not being successful. So can you be too early with something?
So there are both sides to it. Like for example, I can give a very recent example. So everyone in the BFSI, other industries it has not touched it, talks about blockchain technology. Right. So just taking a step back, so why I brought in blockchain. So when you talk about digital, and when you talk about digital journey, so and what is the technology involved in it? So blockchain, API, IoT, so on and so forth. So all these technologies put together, if you bind it in a cultural bind, it becomes digital transformation. So blockchain, there are early adopters, and there are people, I am pretty sure, sitting on the fence, waiting this to happen, and then we'll, take that jump, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line. So early adopters will have their own advantages, and obviously there are pros and cons to it. Maybe you could, by the time blockchain becomes saying, you could become a legacy.
Yes,
that risk is always there. But mind you that if it is a top to bottom journey, like Martin again said, so it should be imbibed from the top management. So I jokingly say, the appraisal goes from the bottom to the top, but the money comes from the top to the bottom. Similarly, the digital transformation will come from the top to the bottom. And something is happening.
And the pain will flow from bottom to up?
Maybe, yeah. But I think you should be always treat it as a journey. So, Abhi, you have reached a destination and I will wait for something to happen, then maybe what you said could true. But if you are continuously on that journey, boss, there is always a station coming ahead, then you will never lose the game. You will always be ahead of the people. So, I am taking blockchain as an example, and which is, maybe you can mark my word, maybe next time we meet it, we'll be on that journey, So we are on the early adopters, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Rajendra. So I want to ask Keyur, who sort of represents the more traditional, large manufacturing industry, and so what do you envisage digital transformation for your industry and your kinds of organizations?
First of all, thanks and very good afternoon to everyone. To start with, working for organization like Essar, where we have various different verticals, where right starting from steel manufacturing to oil refineries to ports and shippings to the call centers like Aegis, etc. And recently, now so while the journey started with the typical manufacturing as in this one, but taking digital transformation as a cue. We also came up with TMW, so that's the mobile wallet. So now that's also one of our arm in that. We also have the IT services arm. Now, in this way, I'm saying the organization like Essar, who started the journey with a typical manufacturing mindset, has also now transformed into or rather taken a second lane, which actually talks only on digital methods or the communications. So that's one way. Second is I normally keep quoting these examples, like we all talk about the IoTs or the Internet of Things and all that. We have a term called IOC, that's the Internet of Cows or the connected cows that we
yes.
So as a part of our Essar Agrotech, where we have where we have cows which has a small tag, through which is kind of, so each and every cow is kind of monitored, and any deflection into the daily routine is kind of an alert goes back, and again vet is kind of consulted, etc.
So how many cows do you have like this?
So we started with close to 500 cows at that time. It has kind of gradually increased to almost 3x times now.
So you have over 1,500 cows.
Yep. And so this journey is so when this started, it was very exciting for all of us. And in fact, there was a lot of pressure from the management also, saying that let's do something which will help us kind of improve the typical dairy part, or how do we increase the production part. So likewise, if you see, there are a lot of I would say adoptions from the digital transformation part.
But would you say that largely in your organization, or let's say in the manufacturing industry, the focus is more on increasing productivity or efficiency for digital transformation, or is it to actually come up with some brand new things?
So if you so just to answer that, at least within Essar, so it's actually both the ways. First is improve the productivity and yes, and kind of cut down the production cost. That's one. And second is bring out new. So in fact, just to quote a very small example is we came up with a CCC. That's the Central Command Center, which actually for Essar Steel at Hazira. So it's a kind of state of the art facility that we have come up with, which actually has a 24/7 manned by the business teams, where we take feeds from each of the plant. So that's the level 2 feeds that we call as a part of the manufacturing area, where you take from the raw feeds from each of the plant units, and the decision happens right there at the CCC, where the business team takes the call saying that today the manufacturing, or rather the arc furnace should use which form of power. Let's say if the gas prices are higher today, which then shall we use the coal-based power in that way. So that's one area. And second is we also have kind of, there's a kind of R&D team that has also kind of working very closely with the CCC. So now a lot of new product lines are also coming as a part of the this one journey.
Thanks, Keyur. So Tejveer, I want to ask you, you are in a line of business which is so fluid and which is completely dynamic, which is the media industry. So from your perspective, where do you see the digital transformation in that industry? I mean, we are seeing a lot, but as BCCL as a organization is also an active participant in this.
Sure.
But how does digital transformation affect BCCL itself?
Well, to be very fair, we are a legacy organization, 178 years old organization, and the irony is that we are actually on the publishing side of it.
Yes.
So digital transformation for us, really caters to multiple aspects of our consumers. So what we did as a strategy is we divided our consumers or customers into various buckets. So one is the internal customer that we have, which is our own teams, the IT team, the editorial team, or the sales team which we have. How is it that we can look at digital transformation for providing various solutions and services to them. Second is the consumer, which is all
the readers
like you and me, for the readers.
Right.
And third are the customers who are actually the
who pay the bills,
who actually pay for the
who pay the bills.
So for us it was a thank you. So for us it was a different ball game altogether. And I think the very first thing that we started off was creating a vision for the entire IT team, because 177-year-old legacy, people used to just grab any piece of computer and that was digital. That was the digital transformation to start off with. But then I think we defined a vision for us and we defined a strategy which was a 5-year roadmap. And eventually we rolled out by getting ourselves on the cloud. That was internally for all our customers. I think we were the first ones from a media vertical perspective in India who ventured into the hybrid cloud model. And that was the starting point of it. Over the last 1.5 years, you would see from a consumer perspective, we have built up applications like Citizen Reporter app, which was first launched on Maharashtra Times. Today, we are very proud to say that it is on Times of India as well, the TOI edition. And going forward, we will be launching the same app for multiple other editorial newspapers that we have, the brands that we have. So that's another thing which is touching the consumer side of it. From a sales perspective, again, we are getting all those applications which give all our sales guys the platform whereby they can take a decision on the spot as to what kind of inventory we have which is readily available, which we can sell to the agency or to the customer on a real-time basis. I think that's the key for us today.
Yeah,
and that's where we are headed. Yeah.
Sort of complexity of the editions and the brands that you have, that's a complex problem to
See,
solve.
I'm not just talking about, multi-brand. I'm just talking about single brand right now.
Okay.
Because within the brand itself, the number of pages that we have, we are talking about, let's say, a 24 or a 28 or a 48 pages subscription, especially in the festival time. This is the time when we need real-time inventory on a real-time basis. What kind of space is available? Who is willing to give me that extra money for that space? That's what we are talking about. Okay. So can we bring that kind of flexibility and visibility to our sales team? I think that's...
I think inventory being a perishable commodity in the newspaper business, you need to optimize it completely.
The newspaper itself is it has a 30-minute shelf life.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very important for us.
Yeah, thanks Tejveer. So, Navin, I want to ask you, you were on the consulting side of things, and you work with a lot of organizations. So in your view, how do people view digital transformation? I mean, what do you tell them, about digital, when you say digital transformation? I think, it goes to Martin's first question, what is digital transformation? So in your view, how do Indian companies view digital transformation? Is it just automation? Is it just, going on the cloud where digitally transformed? I mean, what do people perceive digital transformation as?
See, in a lighter way, I think in today's time, it's a buzzword, right? So everybody wants to talk about digital transformation. But I think my view is there's a lot of confusion between technology and digital, right? So people actually use both technology and digital in the same way, right? And only of late, people are now understanding the difference that, the traditional technology kind of initiatives are very different than the kind of digital initiatives which we are talking about. Now, having said that, there are organizations which basically are talking about separate departments or separate kind of entities, which basically are dealing with digital initiatives. And as Martin was also talking about, I think these are largely business-driven kind of initiatives, right? And in that chart which you're talking about, technology comes. I know I'm sitting in a technology majority group here, but technology comes at the last. But if you really see from the overall digital transformation perspective, I define it largely into 4 buckets, right? One, obviously, technology has to be there, whether you talk about automation, whether you talk about, you mentioned about robotics, right? RPAs, etc. You talk about analytics, you talk about cyber security, right? As they say, data is now
the new oil,
right?
The new oil.
So I think, technology definitely is there, right? But I think very important thing is the way customer behavior is changing, the expectations which are changing. I think everything need to be seen from the customer perspective, right? So maybe to borrow his thing, he said, keep customer at the heart of your entire business strategy. Because I think currently, or as we move forward, I think the expectations from the customer are going to change rapidly. So the service level expectation, the speed related expectations are going to be very, very different. Those who are not able to meet those expectations are definitely going to be laggards. Third most important component of the whole thing is the regulatory kind of changes, right? We mentioned about what's happening to Uber in London, or the whole geopolitical kind of scenario which we are talking about, right? The kind of changes which US has seen, right, post the new president coming in, or what the entire nationalism which is happening in Australia, France, India, and elsewhere, right? So all those are changes which will completely disrupt the business, right? Our government here is talking about going completely to by 2030. What do they call it? The automobile industry, electric cars, right? Now that will completely disrupt, right? And that will completely disrupt the existing automobile industry. But at the same time, for example, we are talking to 3 or 4 organizations which are now talking about how we can set up our business to have the entire storage as the next line of business, right? So it can give opportunity, right? So as long as you are taking care of technology, considering the customer in mind, and obviously keeping the regulatory and the geopolitical sensitivities in mind, I think that is what something which is part of your transformation strategy.
So, but then I want to ask you a very provocative question, building on what Navin just said, and what you said in your presentation as well, that should you be reactive to consumer needs and demands and expectations, or should you be proactive in developing? There are, Steve Jobs and even Ford famously said, if you ask a customer what he wants, he's only going to want an improved horse cart. He won't say, I want an automobile. But, and so similar was the view held by Jobs, saying that if you go ask people what they want, then they can't tell you what they want because they have not seen the future yet. So how do you do the future?
Well, I think it's really interesting. A couple of comments just to pick up on what you said. I think you made a great point about the consumer expectations, because as private consumers, if we don't get instantaneous response from the app, then we're furious. Your customers, if your apps don't work, then they're calling your call center or calling or writing to your CEO. And that behavior gets brought into the enterprise as employees because we expect our systems to work in exactly the same way. And I think that's one of the challenges that we in the technology industry have, that the likes of the app economy has completely changed expectations of employees in terms of the systems that we work with. But to your point, how do you sort of foresee the future? I have to say, Padre Apple, but a very good friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur posted on Facebook this morning that she thought that the engineers responsible for the 11.0 iOS release had previously worked on Windows Vista on the grounds that it's so bad. But I think the way I'd answer it is, I've touched on this briefly. What we've tried to do is to say, we've got to have sort of a continuous improvement cycle for our customers. That we have to understand that our customers have got to upgrade from previous versions. But at the same time, we've got to disrupt ourselves. And so the only way we've thought of doing that is by having this separate incubator as part of the CTO's organization. And that separate incubator has produced, to date, one technology that we've called Jarvis, which is an AI technology that we've integrated into one of our applications. And there are a number of others that are moving sort of through that cycle as well. So we're using the technique of having sort of, I don't want to say business as usual, because our mainstream engineering team are reinventing our products as well. We just produced a cloud-based integrated application and infrastructure monitoring solution that we think is better than anything in the marketplace, and that was the mainstream team. But we've got this disruptive outfit as well to try to bring innovation through that different approach into our business.
So Rajendra, then coming back to you, you said you are on a journey and you are undertaking a digital transformation, and that the evidence that you're doing some apps and you're trying out some new technologies shows that you are there. But in your own view, do you think how fast or slow does this need to be? I mean, yes, we can do slow and steady, and that was the traditional way. We gather some requirements, then we imagine customer wants all these things. We go out, do some focus groups, get some views from customers, then we develop something.
Yep.
But do you think that's the right way, or is it fast enough?
Yeah, the answer lies in the keyword, relevant. So you have to be relevant. He refers to 178 years. So I am very sure the way they are going, 200 years also they will be relevant. So the answer lies here. So whether it is 1 month relevant or 1 year relevant, you have to ensure that at any point of time you are relevant as a bank. I can give one more example. So when we had the brick and mortar banks, first we used to create branches, that applies to branches in Europe and US also. Create as many branches as possible and then look at the customer so that the footfalls, and then you start saying what is your cost per customer and revenue per customer. Now the whole game has changed. You are talking about a digital bank. Many of the banks, including our bank, is looking at a separate entity where you could become a digital bank. So it starts from the customer. And mind you, we are not going to ask him a question whether you need an automobile or a horse cart. What we are going through is and that the word he used was very important. It's a customer experience we are talking about. See, at the end of it, he is still passing money from point A to point B. But what he is going through, like for example, why do people love these roller coaster rides? It is nothing but an experience, right? Why do people love simulators? It's nothing but experience. I think something exactly happens in a digital, what we call the omni-channel. It doesn't matter it takes an electron or it takes a mile. It doesn't matter. I am going through an experience where money is transferred. I don't even realize it. But earlier days, he has to stand in a queue, take maybe cash, go to the teller, blah, blah, blah. So that whole thing is gone. So what important word, and Martin, thanks for that. Experience is the key word. Because as you rightly said, we can't ask the customer what product you want. I mean, you should never ask that question. What you should worry about is how is the experience? Is he enjoying? The people in the room, are they enjoying this experience?
Yeah, let's ask. Thanks. So, Tejveer, I want to come back to you also. So you mentioned some innovative things that you are doing in the media industry, which were not typically how the media industry used to operate. I mean, it was more like, okay, you have some editors, some people creating content, you dispense it out and you demand that people like it and they appreciate it. Correct. And now you are talking about crowdsourced content and being able to do more interactivity, and the technology allows you to do it. inside the organization, what needs to change to enable this? Culturally, have you seen some
That's a
change
$1
or-
million question. I think, you yourself answered it. Culture. I think it has to be top driven. Historically, editorial teams, they are very, they are in a
Very possessive.
shell always. They work in a shell environment and they will never like to share anything. I think the mindset is changing now. They also want to understand as to what the consumer thinks or what we as readers think as to what they have written. What's the feedback for them? So today we have developed a technology wherein we are seeking feedback from our readers. There are chat sessions with the editors wherein they are commenting as to what they think about the story, how they can improve about a particular content that they have published. So that's something which is changing, and I think that's a very positive sign. In parallel to that, if you really look at it, we are also trying to address the stories published by the consumers, we as citizens, the TOI Citizen Reporter app or the Maharashtra Times Citizen Reporter app. We have tied back with the government where the Maharashtra government, the communal, the civil department, they are really addressing the problems which are being published through that app. So it is giving back to the society as well. And that's where we are impacting the readers as well. Because that is what is forcing them again and again to go back to the app, publish more stories.
Right. So it's just sort of a virtuous cycle that you
Correct.
are
And
building.
again, so I just touched upon two of these aspects. Similarly, we are addressing the agencies and the sales team as well. So again, it's all changing. It's all transforming. Again, it's an evolving stage. As I said, 177 years of legacy. People who join here, join as an intern and they retire as the chief editor. So you can just imagine it's very difficult to change that perception, that thought process. But we are reaching there. We are reaching that goal.
So Keyur, how are you finding it within your whole SR organization? You are a very large organization. So when you undertake some of these new initiatives, what is the level of difficulty or you face on account of culture?
See, it's actually
Because I think Martin mentioned that's a very big point in a digital transformation.
Absolutely.
That culture is a big issue.
Absolutely. So in fact, we actually face both the flavors of experiences from the typical IT team perspective. First is we are fortunate that it's a top driven approach where the senior management are kind of more tech savvy. So it actually comes back as a top driven approach. Now imagine a CEO sitting at the remote part of Orissa, that's okay, and where the food is hard to find, and he's sitting into a very well established campus, but then again you don't have anything around aside, and by 5 you have to leave the premise. By 5 p.m. you have to leave the premise so that because you are into a typical
Township, small township.
Maoist zone. So you have to come out of the premise, you have to go back to the city area and all that. Now sitting into those tension areas, CEO, and if you ask them that now we are rolling out something new, now you have to change what you have been doing, and now you have to now change the settings, and now from tomorrow onwards you can watch this, or rather you can access this through the other ways. It's very frustrating for them, right? So the adaptability part is the key. So whatever we roll out, we have to ensure that we make the changes at the back end, least changes at the user end, so that because any user who, so that was one example. We talk about the people sitting at Mahan, that's in MP, which is again one of the remote part of the country, and where again to reach that location, it takes almost 6 hours by road. You have to reach there. There is no other way to reach there. And when you reach there, you have to ensure that the connectivity. So even on today, we are kind of struggling with a stable connectivity over there. In the typical digital era, what we say. So what we talk about, let's say if we have to implement something in cloud, which is typical cloud specific, we have to ensure that the people sitting at the power plant in Mahan should also have a seamless experience that we have at corporate office in Mumbai, for example. So likewise, the experience. So whatever we roll out, we have to ensure considering the other phase, the end user experience.
So do you then design for the lowest common factor?
Absolutely. So it's both. So if you ask me, so we have to take care of the both. So in fact, when we take care of, so as a part of implementation, as I said, the maximum changes are done at the back end. the least at the user end, so that user doesn't need to kind of make a lot of change, or we need to kind of train the users. I mean, that's at the minimum.
So Martin, I would like to get your view upon this, this issue about experience management, and what are your own views on this, and what are you seeing in terms of delivering experiences?
I'll give you a very personal example, and I come back to a place where I spend seemingly most of my life, Singapore Airlines. Their app for many, many months until they upgraded it was locked, calling me Ms. Mackay. And I couldn't change it. Either they knew something about me that I wasn't aware of, or it was just deeply frustrating, and I called them, and actually I'm proud to say Singapore Airlines have recently become a customer, and we're now actually trying to sell them the technology we have that would allow them to understand what a terrible customer experience they create on their app. But just one personal example of the frustration you get if you don't worry about the experience. From our point of view, we're making a big investment in trying to get a common user interface across many of our products. And, I think we're using some of the techniques that are quite tried and trusted. We're bringing users in and we're having them say, sort of doing A/B testing, and having the engineers actually sit with the end users who are trialing the software, and the end user saying that makes no sense, I can't use this, and doing it that way. So we're from our own personal.
And the engineer not saying you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think quite honestly, 5 years ago, I wasn't with CA Technologies 5 years ago, but probably 5 years ago that was the reaction. Well, of course, the end users are too stupid to be able to use the software properly. That's been part of the cultural transformation that our CEO has driven, which is to put yourself in the mind of the customer, in the place of the customer. And we try to do that all the time, both from a business point of view and from a technology point of view.
So Navin, in your experience in consulting with organizations, what has been your experience about, people develop a solution, they deploy a solution, and then do they worry about the customer experience at all? I mean, on an average, or is it that, oh, we've got it done, we've rolled it out, we are done, check mark?
See, it varies from industry to industry, right? So to put it in a very generic kind of thing will be unfair. But if it is a sort of a hardcore industry where customer sort of experience is the key, right? If you
like e-commerce,
e-commerce, right? Retail or any of those kind of things, or it may not matter much to a reality company, for example, right? But maybe it will definitely matter to a consumer electronics or a e-commerce kind of country. It is changing over a period of time, right? 3 years back, let's say if you would have asked me this question, I'll say fine, they just wanted to be present on that platform, and because there is a pressure, somebody mentioned about the pressure from the top, so you have to be there, you have to have that kind of channel, and you put together something, right, and then you be there, right, without worrying too much. As long as it is having the basic functionality, I think you are okay. But too much, not too much concern on the experience part of it. But if I look at now, right, and whether it is providing the level of experience, right, whether it is ensuring interface with various other kind of platforms, including the payment gateways and so on and so forth, is completely changed, right. The kind of awareness which has within the technology team, which is developing, is much more business oriented vis-a-vis what it was, let's say, 3 years back. And it is largely, I would say, across organizations. Absolutely.
Okay. That's, yeah, sure.
So I think it is very interesting, so we deliver technologies, and you talked about the least common factor, So in the banking industry particularly, there was a typical problem. I'm just stating that because it is very closely linked to the digital transformation. So like for example, inclusion. There are certain sections of the society, they don't have a smartphone. And most of the fund transfers, year back, all apps, they could work only on smartphones. So you couldn't transfer money using a regular feature phone. So it was pretty simple. It was a technology problem. So we found a solution for that. we worked with now I'm talking about a fintech company. Now these are the stakeholders which you referred to earlier.
Right.
Now it is very important for a bank which has the financial muscle to work with a agile, fintech company, startup, innovation. They don't have the finance. But if we work together, and that's what we are doing, and partnering. So their innovation, their agility, partner with the financial muscle of the bank, and we have developed many such solutions in the last couple of years. This solution is very interesting. So one of the startup companies, they designed below the SIM, they designed a hardware piece. The moment you put that feature phone for the fund transfer acted like a smartphone. It's a software hardware solution.
Oh, okay.
We call it the SIM Say Pay, and there was a lot of media coverage also for that. So what it helps is the lowest common denominator. A person having a 1000 INR feature phone can actually do a fund transfer, mobile to mobile. So this is also important from a technology when we talk about digital transformation. So, and
You need the right cost-effective solutions sometimes.
Correct, yeah.
Just to make it happen, particularly in a very constrained economy in India in particular levels or sectors.
And the ecosystem per se.
And the ecosystem, yeah. So, Martin, I want to ask you, based on your experience, what are the typical sort of KPIs or governance norms that are used for digital transformation? Are they different from what we have been using in IT traditionally, or business metrics? How do you measure digital transformation? What's the right way?
Well, I think ultimately we are undertaking all of these business initiatives for one reason, which is to achieve growth, financial metrics, etc. But if you have that as the ultimate goal, then I think you're going to miss the point. The most crucial one that we measure in terms of how we've changed over the last 5 years is customer retention and customer satisfaction. I think even in my year, have really focused on those two metrics more than any other. So you said if we have, it's very simple, if we have happy customers, they're probably going to renew the software agreement with us, and they're probably going to look on us in a more favorable light to buy more. Whereas if we have unhappy customers, then we've got to work even harder to replace them. So for all the efforts of cultural and technology change that we've undergone, that's been, I think, the key metric. And we have quite a sophisticated internal balanced scorecard. And in talking to our customers around the region, they have one theme that you highlighted, which again is the experience. It's about, I'm losing market share, my customers are leaving me because the experience I provide is terrible. There was a great conversation I had with the CIO of a Japanese bank, very famous brand. And he said, here's the problem. We still have a retail brokerage arm. We still have a lot of sales reps who are out selling our retail brokerage. And what happens is they go out and they talk about this particular brand, which is highly trusted in Japan. And they talk about all of the advantages of working with this particular brand, and they sign up as customers. But they do most of their trading on an electronic platform, a complete separate one, because it's much easier and much cheaper. So the problem is they've got all of these customers, but a declining revenue base. And so he said that my fundamental problem is the experience that customers have in using our technology just isn't good enough. And so I think that's what we're trying to measure internally, putting much more emphasis around things like NPS, but also the financial metrics of customer retention and revenue retention, etc. I think that's what digital transformation does. It makes you completely rethink the importance of the customer to your business.
Thanks. So I just ask the other panelists also to comment on that fact, measurement of.
Right. So in addition to the financial KPIs, as you mentioned, and the satisfaction, which is directly correlation with the retention, I think one of the other parameter which most of the organization in India particularly, and this is a very Indian context kind of thing, is also the reach. Right. So they actually measure, how we are sort of improving our reach, because India, most of these things are still not reached to all the, right? Maybe in Japan or some other countries that definitely may not be the case. So here in many of the organizations, they actually have a specific parameters to figure out whether it could be geographical reach, whether it could be segment wise. India has a huge demographic kind of change. So all those kind of things are basically being measured.
Thank you. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, Tejveer.
Just like to add, as you said, yes, every organization, every department, every unit would have their own KPIs. typically, if I were, just to share my view, typically we can divide it into 4 different areas. One is the need for speed. Because if you are delayed or if you are not really acting fast, I think you miss the bus. The second is how is it that you can impact productivity? Because that is very key. While we are all saying, okay, fine, we are doing this, we are doing that, but is it really impacting the performance of that particular individual or that particular organization? The third key parameter is, in terms of increase of revenue. Because unless and until it impacts revenue, it's of no use to any business per se. And last but not the least, it's something which is very, very critical, and that is, how it reduces your overall cost of doing that business. So I think these are the 4 key parameters, and if you are able to address all of these, I think you have a success story to share.
Thank you. So Rajendra, you have any comments?
One more important thing, so one, as you rightly said, revenue, but when we do this sort of digital transformation, we are talking about a journey, and many of the investments are sometimes capital intensive. So for the first initial years, maybe you may not be, you might be bleeding actually. But as a strategy, you should be very clear what is it you are trying to do. So as I said earlier, just putting an app here and there is not a digital transformation. So if your strategy right from the top, bound with the culture, I use the term borrowing from you, Martin, then you are very sure I am putting in X amount of money, I am pretty sure in the next 3 years this is going to be my ROI. First year it could be negative, but second year it could be positive, something like that.
So Keyur, any final words on how do you measure digital transformation? What do you do?
So while a kind of it's a lot has been said, the only part which we in fact we are kind of emphasizing is how do we move towards the new line of businesses? How do we, so more about, so I mean a lot has been done as a part of the overall manufacturing, as I said, but the overall focus is more about how do we leverage now over to the new dimensions of the business in that way.
Thank you. That's an interesting point, that new business development or new lines or new products or new services. Yeah. So we have a couple of minutes. So yeah.
Just new services. So I can give one example. So we are possibly maybe one of the 2 banks who have actually done API banking and API falls into the digital transformation. So we have actually formed a channel. And today I can proudly say out of all the transactions we do, particularly the payment transaction, 30% now goes to this new channel. And out of that 30%, 70% are brand new business. So those customers who never banked with us, they bank only through API. I mean, their precondition was there. If you give me API, particularly the e-retailers, they came to us with the precondition. If you are doing API banking, we want to bank with you.
So that's interesting. I mean, so, we can say you are ahead of the market at this point in time, that you are anticipating a need and you're building something. I think that's very smart. So we have a couple of minutes. Are there any questions that from the audience which you want to put to the panel, and if they could address? Anybody had any questions about digital transformation? Or you think we've had enough discussion on digital transformation? Okay, if there are no questions, yeah, please. Okay, can you just get a microphone? Please just give us a moment.
When we talk about the apps, etc., I have one from the customer experience point of view for a bank. I may sound a little oldish and funny, but then earlier days we used to get the salary, so you see the cash in hand. When you spend, you feel the pain of money going out and you buying something, so on. But now with the apps coming in, you just transfer the money and goes in, goes out. I mean, you don't get that feeling of you earning money or you losing the money. So
it's fairly friction free.
Yeah. So how do we address that? I think that is one point maybe that will attract more people to come to digital banking, especially in India, because the feeling part is not there.
No, I'm pretty interesting. I mean, so you're basically saying when the salary gets credited through an SMS, I mean, that is what you don't feel elated. And when something gets debited, you don't feel anything about it. That's what you're saying, right? So
no, then you probably feel sad.
No, not that's what he's saying. So you have attained possibly nirvana through digital transformation. Okay, but having said that, but you have made a very interesting point. I read one of the ET articles couple of weeks back, wherein the pensioners, who are the 65 plus. Yeah. I mean, in India it is very relevant. I'm not sure how about Europe or other places. Pensioners love to go to a bank branch, sit there, talk to the teller, maybe have a cup of tea, spend some hours because time is not of essence for them, and maybe just withdraw
Have
whatever
some
pension he
human
gets.
interaction.
So that is human interaction, and that is what he is also referring to. So in digital, I don't think, unless you have some AI later on, you can't have some emotions put into it. That's what you are referring to, right? You can put some smileys.
Sure.
Yeah, but still that
So I think we need to have an AI app says, as soon as salary comes, yay, you got money now. There are 8 ways to spend it. But I suggest you save some money this month.
There's a very interesting product which I came across, developed by one of the IT companies. So they have this, the handset, the hands-free
Right.
basically. And how do you get instant feedback? So for example, if you ask me something, right? And okay, Navin, what's your view on this thing? And I will say, I may not
Right.
mean it, right? But I will say just
to
for
be
the
polite.
sake of it, right? This particular device, right, basically captures your emotions, right? And there is obviously an application behind it. And it, using artificial intelligence, is basically sort of, tell you exactly what are the kind
The
of
real
emotions
mood.
which are going on. And they have done the pilot testing, and it is actually, I've seen it, so this is not something which is, which is fiction. They use this in the stores, right? So they give it to the customers based on demographic, based on, gender, etc. And they get their feedback, right? And immediate feedback. So for example, they ask them to wear it, and when they are actually seeing the product, they are going through the emotions.
Okay.
And then based on that, they are changing the location of the product or pricing or
packaging,
whatever,
the
it is,
pricing,
right?
yeah.
So that is actually what is going on currently. And they used it in one of their AGMs, right? And they asked the board members, so what do you think about the performance of the company? And they gave certain set of feedback.
That I
which
can
was
see as
good.
being a good use for it.
And they actually sort of use this with that, and they realize that, okay, if you're saying 7 out of 10 is actually meaning 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
So I think you should buy those earphones.
So it's actually, there's a, so L&T Infotech is basically doing this, and they have done this. So it's very, very nice, quite innovative.
We have built a demonstration of Amazon's Alexa interacting with your bank account, so using our API technology. So
Could be
maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
It
It could be a bit dangerous if your wife were to say, now pay for this product, and Alexa immediately goes and pays for it. Yeah, but
I will tell you about more dangers, but he has a question.
yeah, you have a question. Just the last question here.
Yeah. So most of the automations and digital transformation go with the process change in the way that happens today. So without a proper change management, the success of the digital transformation is highly depending on how effective your process is. So from the IT perspective, so it's looking at a product implementation failure or digital transformation failure, but reality is the process is not set right. So in your experience, should that be separated? First change the process, do the right process, and then automate it?
Yeah, so maybe I can start. So I mentioned it in a couple of minutes back. You could have a digital department, focusing on digital, as you mentioned. But that again has challenges, and the challenges which you have mentioned is the process, because the whole bank is following a particular process. So we are talking about operations process, we are talking about audit processes, we are talking about customer processes, we are talking about the way forms are filled, etc., blah, blah. But when you talk about digital banking, all these things have a very different meaning, and as I said, it's a different culture, it's a different mindset. The employee is developing, the employee who is selling, and the customer who is actually experiencing it. So you would have heard about Fedor Bank. I mean, it's a similar experience. It's a completely digital bank. That is the reason people actually opted for that, because brick and mortar bank having one more department digital is not helping. Something similar is happening in India also. Couple of banks are thinking very seriously to form a separate entity, a digital bank. And our bank is also very seriously thinking about it. I am pretty sure there are a couple of other banks in India who are thinking about it. So that is the reason. I mean, just to answer your point, so they want to have a completely, it may not be a different legal entity, but a different corporate entity under the same umbrella. It could have a different branding altogether. And there are experiments being done. Fedor, as I said, is a good example. Indonesia also, a couple of banks have already done it. And this is particularly in the retail segment, it has been successful. Fedor was not a very successful story, but they attempted. Yeah. So, thank you.
Your question is basically on the sequencing of whether we should do the process definition first and then do the...
Just to add to the point that he said, don't show more change to the end user. So that, that kind of approach gets into the situation where whatever process is good or bad, just automate it. Sometimes
So there are two aspects of it, one, obviously, certain processes need to be changed, which are internal to the organization. Because if you're changing the way you're doing business, right, so those SOPs need to be redefined and the process need to be changed. But if you're talking about changes to the end customer, now that can always be manipulated, right, in the sense as long as they're getting the same or better level of experience, frankly, they're not worried about what kind of process which you are being followed, right. So internal to the organization, I think for any digital transformation strategy kind of engagement, changing processes is the integral part of it, right? Whether it is, changing the customer experience depends on the industry to industry.
But you say automate irrespective of the quality of the process. If you think about why you automate for two reasons. It's to increase productivity and increase quality. And if you're going to automate something that's going to do neither of those, then you're probably causing more problems than just sticking with the original manual process in the first place.
Thank you. I think we've sort of run out of time, so I'm getting signals from the back. So, but I want to thank at least all the audience for listening to this panel discussion with great interest and for participating in it. And I would also like to thank all our panelists for being here today: Keyur Desai, Tejveer Bhogal, Navin Agarwal, Martin Mackay, and Rajendra Mhalsekar. Thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful having you. I think it was a great discussion.